Hi, my name is Alan McPheeters, and I am the chair of the Island County Republican Party. Welcome to the second installment of our Republican candidate interviews for 2020. About a month ago, we interviewed 5 Republican candidates for governor of Washington. In this episode, we interview 3 of the 4 Republican candidates for Island County Commissioner. Island County, like most counties in Washington state, has a 3-member board of commissioners, each elected from a commissioner district. The Board of Commissioners is the legislative authority in the county and is also the principal administrative authority for the county government. Commissioner Jill Johnson will describe the job in more detail in our 3rd interview. 2 of the 3 commissioner positions are up for election this year. In District 1, which is Central and South Whidbey, Commissioner Helen Price Johnson has decided not to run for re-election, choosing instead to run for the state Senate. We will be interviewing 2 Republican candidates for this position. There are also 2 Democrats and 2 independents in the race. In District 2, which is the city of Oak Harbor and areas east, west, and south, we will hear from Commissioner Jill Johnson, who is running for her 3rd term. There are 2 Democrats and another Republican running for the job. I should probably note that we invited that 2nd Republican, Oak Harbor businessman Dan Evans, to participate in these interviews. However, at the time of the invitation, the Central Committee of the Island County Republican Party had already voted to endorse Commissioner Johnson's re-election effort. It is a common practice among Washington's county parties to endorse incumbents running for re-election. Considering this endorsement, Mr. Evans declined our invitation. Now, before I begin, I'd like to say a few words about the Island County Republican Party. Our mission is to elect Republicans to public office in Island County. Our part of the job is identifying voters by their party affiliation so that our candidates can focus on outreach to persuadable voters. We also do get out the vote work to make sure all Republican-leaning voters turn in their ballots. If you would like to help us with these and other important tasks in this critical election year, you can contact us through our website, islandcountygop.com/get-involved. We begin with District 1 candidate Damian Green. Mr. Green is a member of the South Whidbey School District's Board of Directors and is currently serving in his 3rd term. This interview was recorded on Friday, July the 3rd. Okay. Hi, Damien. Thanks for sitting down with me to talk about your campaign for Island County Commissioner in District 1. Would you like to start with maybe 5 minutes of an opening statement?
Sure. Good morning, Alan, and I appreciate this opportunity to address everybody here. I am Damian Green. I'm running for Island County Commissioner District 1, which is a very large territory. We go from Monroe Landing up there by the Blue Fox Drive-In and Hasty Lake Road south all the way to the Clinton Ferry Dock. I'm running on my basic philosophy, which is to improve our quality of life here in Island County without increasing your financial burden. And I have ideas and ways to do that on my website at electdamian, DAMIAN.com. I was raised here on Whidbey Island, which you would also see in some of my videos and on my website, but my dad was a state trooper, and we were moved here in 1965 when I was like 3.5, 4 years old. And so I've been raised here and just love the island. I love Whidbey Island. I love its people. I love the spirit that we have here and the way that we help and take care of each other. And so I'm taking on that challenge to continue it on as your Island County Commissioner to be a good steward, which is another thing that I like to look at. Is taking care of what we have before we move on to something else. And that goes back to my time as getting involved with the South Whidbey School District. I did something that wasn't very popular. I stood up against a school bond for 4 new classrooms and a new gym and a proposed tax of $25 million to the people of the South Whidbey School District. And that failed by a huge majority, like 64% of the people voting no. And it was quite evident as to why. So that stance I took, in being out there by myself, people understood that we weren't going to need to spend this tax as well as increase our carbon footprint. We just waited patiently for the student enrollment, which was decreasing, to continue to decrease. We'd be able to just slowly consolidate the students over as time went on. And as we did that, and as things were, as we were learning how to develop and go against decreased funding, proposed some new ideas to the school district, which was renting out facilities. And so we moved the district office and moved it down to the transportation facility, and we rented the district office out. And then from there, it grew. So now we have this full-fledged community center at the old Langley Middle School that is generating, with all the facilities we're renting out, over $300,000 a year in annual income, which is just a huge bonus to the district. But it was a way to mitigate decreasing funding and look at new ways of doing that. Additionally, some of the things I brought when I got involved in the actual election and became a school board member was looking at our energy upgrades, because the school system hadn't had an energy upgrade forever. And by doing that, we implemented the ability to save ourselves $125,000 a year in energy costs. And so that's another huge thing. So I bring these new ideas that I feel that we could use at the county level, especially since we're going to be seeing the decrease in revenue through the loss of sales and gas tax revenues. And we can definitely mitigate that. I have some ideas for that too. But I also have, in the last 10 years being on the school board, taken permanent stances as a conservative, being the only one, working really well though with my counterparts, and being able to work together, especially since it is a nonpartisan position. But I have stood firm about the raises for the superintendent, for example. The last raise went from $170,000, I'm going to paraphrase or rough guess, to $195,000, which is more than what our governor makes or what our United States congressmen, including United States senators, make. It's even more than what our county Superior Court judges make. And so I was not in support of that, because it's still a government position, a government role. And I think that's what led me to this spot here running for Island County Commissioners, because I stand firm for conservative values and I hold true to those. And so that's why I've decided to run for county commissioner. But I should add one more thing. So in the 10 years that I've been on the school district, we have seen this outdoor classroom that we have. It's now been renamed the Reading F Outdoor Classroom, and I don't know if you've been there, but people from all over the state, especially schools from all over the state, come to our outdoor classroom down in the Max Welton watershed. And they learn a lot about environment and everything else. But one of the things our own students do is they raise salmon fry throughout the year, and then they take their salmon fry down to the Max Welton Creek in the spring and they let them go in the hopes of seeing the salmon return. But in the last 15 years, there's been diminishing returns because there's some environmental issues happening there with things from the beaver and blocked culverts and just, you know, all the different entities involved. But I haven't seen any salmon come back, and we used to see that. And so I have a desire to repair the Max Welton watershed, especially as it pertains to the outdoor classroom, because there's people down there in the Max Welton Valley who are losing their property to an undesired wetland. And then that takes me full circle to the whole entire county, because now the Department of Ecology has some areas that are not wetlands or are not streams that are designated on Google as being streams and so forth. So I think we need to start looking at things like that from a new perspective and fixing things at the county level. And I think that's really where it comes down to, is that there's things that we see that need to be paid attention to and fixed. And so that's why I'm running for Island County Commissioner, so that I can improve our quality of life without increasing our financial burden.
That is very interesting. You just said a lot of things I didn't know about the south part of Whidbey Island, because I live in Oak Harbor and I don't get that down that way as much as I might like. One One of the things we're going to circle back to some of those things, but one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you have work experience with Washington State Ferries, and you are currently an engineer with VNSF Railway. So my thinking is that transportation is an area that you are going to have some particular insight into as an Island County Commissioner. What do you think are the key transportation issues facing Central and South Whidbey, and what do you think we need to do to fix them?
I think it's actually the whole Island County, Alan, because really part of this transportation plan that I have extends to Camano Island. And they're part of Island County, and they're within our community. And so here's what I see. So let me give you some background. I started with the Washington State Ferries as a sophomore in high school, and I worked with them and through college days at Central Washington University. And then I became an insurance agent for 27 years. And then I wanted to do something completely different. Kids were grown and everything else. And so I started looking at different things. I'm a pilot, so I applied at Boeing. And of course, everybody has an affinity for trains. I applied at BNSF and so forth. And 500 people applied for the job at BNSF, and they hired 10. And I'm grateful that I was able to get that job. And in that 5 years I've been there, I've been promoted now to a locomotive engineer. And one of the things that I've seen is that I go basically from Tacoma to New Westminster, Canada, as well as from Seattle over to Wenatchee. And so when we go on these long distances, we do have rest periods and stay in hotels and so forth. But when you're down in Tacoma, you see the sounder running all these people, lots of sounder trains taking all these people that work for Boeing to Kent, Renton, and then Seattle. And we come up north here, and the sounder train starts in Mukilteo and goes south, 4 or 5 times a day. It's not as useful, but yet we also have railroad tracks that go right from the Washington State Ferry System's new terminal being built that goes straight on up the hill, which is called Japanese Gulch, to Boeing. And a lot of people walk right alongside the tracks. There's trails there and everything else. It's not really that far. And so, and as you continue on, we have that platform there in Mukilteo. We have a Amtrak station there in Everett, as well as a sounder station. And then you go north. There's not a platform in Marysville, although there's lots of room to put one in and parking. Stanwood, though, has one, which is Camano Island. And Stanwood stops and picks up people for Amtrak. And then there's one up in Mount Vernon as well. And so if you look at that and you start thinking, well, why can't we do like what they're doing on the south end and implement sounders that come from Mount Vernon all the way south and bring those people who are working in Everett? They can get off in Everett. They can come to Mukilteo, and our employees from the island that work at Boeing can easily get on a sounder that takes them up to the hill to work at Boeing. As well as then once we get there, we're looking at just a 1 mile connection to Payne Field and light rail. And then the light bulb goes off again, and you go, wait a minute. Rail infrastructure is fairly inexpensive. It's about $1 million a mile. That doesn't include the engineering and so forth that goes with it. But now if we get to Payne Field and the light rail comes there, there's this whole world that opens up for transportation. And so when I look at that portion of it, that's how the railroad and the state ferries tie in together for me, with helping people get to and from work, both from Camano Island and in South Whidbey and Central Whidbey. I know that we have Boeing people as well. And I actually know that we have people that live on the north end and they drive all the way around to go to work for Boeing. So if we take that one more step further, Boeing has mandatory overtime for people. And then we also have people who may work in the medical industry, like doctors and nurses, or people in the transportation industry, pilots and flight attendants. And then we have people who are just travelers, and they need to catch an early flight in the morning, or they're coming home late on a flight and it doesn't come back. Or we have the Whidbey SeaTac shuttle, and it doesn't pick people up from the south end to go early in the morning. It goes from the north end and goes on around. And so if we were to look at this ferry system that currently we have had in place for eons, there's always been somebody working on the ferry at night here in case there's a hospital emergency. And in the old days when I was a young person, we didn't have the hospital until 72. So the ferries would actually, take people over to the mainland to have babies. And one of my friends actually was almost born on the ferry. But anyway, we look at that and we go, okay, Tokate, for example, has a crew of 13 people on board. And in the smaller ferries, like something named the Hayu, which was a 35-car ferry, only needed a crew of 5. So you could actually bring back something like that Hayu, and if you only had 10 cars on board, you'd still be, a third full, or definitely 25% full. And I think a lot of people who would go, hey, wait a minute, I wouldn't mind giving an extra $5 as a late night tariff just to get me to and from the airport. But it also opens up for all sorts of transportation, because we could do that through the night with a small ferry and that crew, and then not lose any employees out of the deal, because we could implement running that extra ferry during peak hours to move another 70 cars an hour on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And so it's cost neutral as far as employees go with their jobs, but it's opportunity for people here. And I think that opportunity allows people to move here and work elsewhere, because let's face it, Whidbey Island's not going to be able to afford or provide work for everybody, but we have a lot of commuters, and there are a lot of them. So that's kind of where my transportation issues are, is that if we could have that opportunity for people to access a 24-hour ferry system and not close down a major highway 525, I think it's a benefit. It's a win-win for everybody. And meaning that if we can bring younger families to the island, we're going to then have more kids in school, and school districts like South Whidbey and Coopville would be able to increase their student population. That would bring an increase in funding for them, which would then, of course, generate opportunity for more teachers and more programs, and brings life. The kids bring life. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I see. Very good. Well, I like the idea. I have, in my regular job, not these days because of all the restrictions on being out of your house, but I regularly travel for work via SeaTac, and I've been on that SeaTac shuttle, and it is no picnic. Taking that early ferry or early shuttle that goes around through the north end. One other thing I wanted to ask you about is that you are running as a Republican. So first, tell us why you're a Republican, and then maybe I think people have a really clear idea on what being a Republican means at the federal level and maybe even at the state level. But what does it mean? How does being a Republican impact how you would be an Island County Commissioner?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's kind of like what I've been doing on the school district and the school board, and as an Island County Republican, as I said, I'm for increasing your quality of life without increasing your financial burden. I think we can do that, and I'm not about taxes, and I'm certainly not about big pay raises for people and so forth. The other things that make me a Republican is that I believe in property rights, so long as what you're doing is not affecting somebody else, polluting their groundwater, for example. The other things I believe in are our freedoms and our ability to, the Second Amendment, carry guns, but at the same time, I'm a believer in law enforcement. I support law enforcement, and the consensus right now that we're going through with all this stuff, I find it very disturbing, and I hope it comes to an end here soon, because those first responders, they were there for us on 9/11, and they'll be there again for us, so long as we continue to provide that opportunity for them. I just can't see us not having good, solid law enforcement. So I believe in the rule of law, and I think that's where I come from as a Island County conservative, is that it's not that I don't understand the other side. It's just that I don't necessarily agree with some of their philosophies, and that's why I'm an Island County conservative, because I align more with the Republican Party than I do with the Democrat Party.
That might be a good segue to something that we received from a supporter, and I shared this with a little bit earlier, but if we can expand on it, I think that would be great. Let me show you the screen here. So, and this is a statement we received maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. This is a letter that was sent out by the Indivisible Whidbey group in South Whidbey. And it says, this week, Indivisible Whidbey will consider endorsing one of the 2 Democrats running in District 1, Melanie Bacon and Nathan Howard. The only candidate we'll consider endorsing in District 2 is Democrat Fee Michaud. These races are important to our goal of fighting racism and preventing police violence against people of color. If we're looking for increased oversight over our sheriff's office, or perhaps changes in the laws providing immunity for police misconduct, or even defunding county law enforcement, then we might turn to our county commissioners to legislate these changes. And I think we kind of already established with what you said that this is not an approach that you would take. But talk a little bit more about where you think that these guys are getting it wrong.
Somewhere along the lines, I think people have started to misunderstand the police and or started to teach that the police are the bad guys. And I think in teaching that the police are the bad guys, oh, they're following me, they're going to give me a ticket or whatever, is the wrong approach. Like I said, I grew up in law enforcement. And so where I'm headed here is this. The law enforcement officers that we have, we need to get back to respecting them. They do a difficult job. And they may not even necessarily be paid what they should be paid for that job of putting their life on the line on a regular basis. I can say, though, that Dave Hayes, former Legislative District 10 representative, you know, in dealing with certain things that law enforcement have to deal with, such as domestic calls, there's people with mental health issues. And Dave wanted to see, as a sheriff of Snohomish County, those people get immediate medical attention and not just necessarily be locked up. So I understand that portion of it. But justice in our county should not be colorblind at all. And I don't think we have any colorblindness here in this county. If we do, then we need to take care of it. But it should be colorblind. And as far as that statement that they're making, I want to
interrupt you there because I think I misunderstood what you said. So,
okay.
You think we don't have color blindness in this county? Or you think that the justice is currently being administered in a colorblind fashion?
Correct. I think that this county is doing exactly what the law provides for everybody equally.
Okay.
I guess I'd have to see actual, yeah, no, it's okay. If I said it wrong, I want to make sure it comes out right. Yeah. Sometimes, like everybody, we misspeak or, you know, but yeah, I just don't agree I don't agree with that statement of tearing the system down, basically, is what I feel. Defunding the police is like tearing our system down and rebuilding it. And I haven't seen the plan of what the rebuilding plan is, but they certainly want to take it apart. So that's what I'm really getting out of that. And I'm a supporter of law enforcement and justice for all equally. So.
Okay. One of the issues that you talk about on your website is growth, and I think we've kind of touched on that with some of the things you're talking about in transportation. But you mentioned the need for growth in the Freeland area and the issue of how do you put in or handle having a sewer system down there. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. So Island County has one non-municipal urban growth area, and that is Freeland. And by the Growth Management Act, to be a non-municipal urban growth area, you're supposed to have a sewer system. This has been enforced now for years, and Freeland does not have a sewer system. And it's time to look at some things there to allow the growth in Freeland, and that would be one, to get a sewer system and maybe look at outside alternatives being used in an underdeveloped country that we could maybe implement here in Freeland. Two, connect Freeland, if possible, to the system existing already in Langley. And if not, then we move to option three, which is consider removing Freeland from a non-municipal urban growth area, and then looking at something like maybe down here in the south end anyway, as far as Bayview or Clinton, which are a lot closer to Langley to tie into that system, or they have easier access, I believe, to especially Clinton, a deep water affluent dispersal system. And so, plus Clinton has a Clinton Water District. And so if we need that non-municipal urban growth area, then we should be looking at that so that we can now take that and provide growth for business and affordable housing, multiplexes and so forth, so that we can start moving people into new areas for business opportunities and housing opportunities. And so that's why I referenced that whole thing with the urban growth area there in Freeland. If it's not going to have sewers, then it shouldn't have that classification. And by growth management, if we're supposed to have at least one spot like that classified in the county, then let's look at alternatives. I hope that makes sense to you.
Sure. Actually, I think the Growth Management Act is probably one of the biggest challenges that county commissioners face. I spent some time on the Oak Harbor Planning Commission. Are there changes that we need to lobby for in the Growth Management Act that would help ease up some of the problems we have with building additional growth in Island County?
I definitely believe that to be true, but I am like you, a guy that works and may not have all the opportunities available to understand every detail of that. Just like when I got on the school board, I didn't understand necessarily every policy there is, but I certainly have learned and was a fast learner actually when it came to learning school district policies and so forth. So that would be the same thing there. I believe that once I dig into it on a daily basis, yeah, I'm going to find what we need to do and be more exact. And I can rely on other people in this county that have that experience as well. And by having all the contacts in the county, I'm able to draw on a lot of people's insight. And I like that ability to have collaborative thinking, not group think, but collaborative thinking, and to solve problems in a unilateral basis. And, you know, I was watching the Democrat town hall between Mishko and Nathan Howard and then Lewis. And one thing that they happened to mention that I found very interesting was that they happened to say that compromise means you're all losers. And I don't agree with that philosophy either, because yes, in compromise, somebody has to give up something, and they're giving it up from both sides, and you find that nice meeting in the middle that everybody can live with and be happy. But if you can't reach compromise just because, and you won't give in on compromise because you're losing, then that's what's creating this deadlock, and we're not getting anywhere. So compromise is a win. It's a win for both sides. It doesn't mean both sides are losing. It means that we're coming to a mutual agreement here to move forward. And I think compromise is a win-win rather than a lose-lose. So that's how I look towards government.
I couldn't agree more. And I have been in the past a big fan of the work of Dr. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he talks about that a great deal. Another piece of what he talks about there is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And in that town hall that you were watching, and I watched some of it too, I noticed that there's a big push among the progressives in Island County to have more youth involved in politics and maybe having the greater say. And it feels like there's not much of a seek first to understand issue behind that. In fact, I alluded to before we started recording, there's a great quote by Chesterton, the British editorialist, in which he says, he's talking about people who are reformers. Let's say you have a gate across a road, and the reformer comes in and says, we need to tear down this gate. I don't see what the purpose of it is. And Chesterton's response to that was, I will consider letting you tear down this gate if you can tell me why it was put up in the first place. So you have been involved in governance in Island County for 10 years on the school board. I think you have a sense of why things have been put there in the first place. But can you talk more about why these kinds of approaches that we're hearing from the progressive side are problematic?
Yeah, actually, I'll use a recent one with the school board. So there's this growing movement now to remove any resource officers from school districts. Now, South Whitby School District doesn't have a resource officer. But last fall, we had a situation where we had a threat, and it was considered a viable threat. And we needed law enforcement, and I'm glad that they were there to show up for that school threat. So if we start removing resource officers because of the claim that students, it gives them anxiety and stress, well, what kind of anxiety and stress then is created by not feeling safe by not having them? So it's an interesting discussion that's happening right now, and it's happening throughout the country. But I'm sure you're aware, Edmond School District just voted to remove their school resource officer. And I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but from my perspective, there's a reason why that law enforcement officer is there in the first place. And I can think of a lot of good reasons why he's there in the first place. So you're absolutely right, Alan. It's to ask those questions so that we understand more deeply that we're not reinventing the wheel here. Sometimes we're going backwards and we don't even understand our step backwards. So yes, I agree wholeheartly, and that's about the best example I can give you is what's going on right now is to remove the school resource officers, and I would not be in favor of that if we had one. And even though we don't have one, I don't want to change the policy so that we can't bring a law enforcement officer onto campus when needed. So,
and it's ironic because Edmonds is right near Mukilteo, and Mukilteo just had that shooting not too long ago, and we've had shootings in other places as well involving teens. We're coming up to the end of our time. So first, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. I really appreciate it. If some of the viewers want to get involved in your campaign, it's the best way for them to reach out to you at your website, electdamian.com.
Yes, and I would love to have as many volunteers as we can get to help with the campaign. As you know, there's 6 people running in Island County District 1, and I can take all the help that we can get. So yes, reach out to us at info@electdamian is my email, and our website is electdamian.com. Yes.
Right. And one of the other things I will say is I think that you probably have on your website all those little short videos you've been doing, usually a minute or 2 minutes long. I think those have been really terrific. So
thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. I think the longest one is like 2 minutes and 42 seconds, but most of them are really short. And I try to make them somewhat educational too. I don't know if you've caught on to that, but I try to be informative to kind of give a background to certain things and so forth. So yeah, they go from the fire department all the way to Tokatay the whale, and good stewardship. So yeah.
Outstanding. Great. Well, thank you very much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for the time.
You bet. That was our interview with Damian Green, candidate for Island County Commissioner in District 1. And here is the address for his website. Now, before we move on to our next interview, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to become a member of the Island County Republican Party. Members receive our monthly Central Committee meeting packet, which has reports from the chair and our treasurer, news from the Washington State Republican Party and Republican National Committee, and information about candidates, elected officials, and upcoming events. Members also receive invitations to special member-only events, such as our interviews last September with applicants for appointment to replace retiring State Senator Barbara Bailey. Memberships start at $30, and higher-level memberships include tickets to our annual fundraising dinner. For more information, go to islandcountygop.com/membership. Next, our talk with Gary Wray, a Coupeville businessman, chairman of the board of Habitat for Humanity of Island County, and president of the North Whidbey chapter of Hearts and Hammers. This interview was recorded on Thursday, July 2nd. Gary Wray, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us about your campaign for Island County Commissioner in District 1. We're giving everybody that we're interviewing a few minutes to kind of open up with. So why don't you go ahead, and I'll kind of give you a signal when we're getting close to time if you get that far, and go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I do much better just answering questions. People ask me questions and that, but so I'll start with a couple of things that I know won't come up with in questions, and that's there was a challenge, kind of a thing, a pledge to sign a pledge from one of the Democrat opponents, and the pledge is to agree to not to reduce salary by 15% before furloughing or laying off county employees. And so I want to respond to that. I did talk to him a couple of days ago. We communicated, and it was a good conversation. And what I told him was that I would not sign the pledge. First of all, it's not legal. You can't not take your salary. And so you're going to get the salary. You can donate it back. You can donate it wherever you want. And so here's the pledge that I will do, and that is I will pledge the first year. If I get elected as county commissioner the first year, I will I will donate 100% of my salary minus property taxes and income tax, but I will donate it to Habitat for Humanity Island County. I will donate it to Hearts and Hammers. I will donate it to Good Cheer and to Civility First. So anything above for the first year, that's what I would do. And that just kind of broad brushing a pledge to reduce the county budget or whatever is kind of short-sighted. It's not, the county budget is involved, complicated, and you can't just arbitrarily say to keep all government employees or not furlough them. It's going to take hard work to get through this budget. And I also said to him it would have been nice to, instead of just having a pledge given to us, that it would have been nice to all the candidates to get together and figure out how to do that together. So, but that does demonstrate a difference between me and the Democrat, my Democrat opponents, is that I would rather see the money go into the private sector or into nonprofits, and rather than government. I don't see that government employees, in my opinion, they're insulated a little bit from these recessions, these kinds of situations. Not completely, I understand that, but much more than the private sector. I would, the restaurants people, the barbers, salons, and that, they're really hurt with this, and And by just pledging that way, it helps just government. But that's his world that he's been in, and so that's kind of his tribe. The other thing I would like to address is my Republican opponent has, and I've addressed it with him. He denies he sent it out, but there was a letter or some information that was sent out on me claiming that I was negative campaigning, that I was spreading information about him, and none of this was true. He also said in the letter that I have a non-conservative agenda. So I did talk to him 3 weeks ago, and I asked him what he felt was my non-conservative agenda, and he addressed the fact that he has heard or been told that I support low threshold homeless housing, subsidies for homeless housing. And where he got that from, I haven't got a clue. When I ran 4 years ago, I talked pretty extensive about Sunnyview Village, which is a subsidized housing project in the Freeland area, 26 units. It cost over $6 million to build that, which is about $300,000 per unit that's in it or more. Well, that's the minimum number of $6 million. It could have cost a lot more than that when you put everything into it. That's how government builds affordable housing, and that's not affordable. And I don't, it's great that we have the housing. We need it. But I do not support that kind of stuff. So, Damian doesn't know what I believe, but he put information out there. So anyways, that's my opening statement. I would rather answer questions now.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about housing, because that kind of came up on both ends. So you have a background working with Habitat for Humanity of Island County. You're the chairman of the board of Habitat. Is that right?
The current chair. I've been the current chair for 3 years, maybe. I don't know. And I was on the board before. Habitat is a model that I love. It's not a handout. We sell our homes to people. We find ways to reduce their payments so that they can get into a home, but they own the home. And they're buying it and they have a mortgage, and the homes pay property taxes to the county. So when we build a home, it's not off the tax rolls. It contributes to the revenue stream.
That's great. You're also involved in Hearts and Hammers, and you are the owner of I'm a little vague on your business. So it's laser construction.
It is laser construction now. Since last November, it was Wray Brothers for 3-4 years. My brother was my partner. He worked for a company that in the housing turned down, went out of business. Okay. And so he was unemployed. And so he partnered in with me, and we specialize in siding and residential construction. Okay. But my brother retired at the end of November, so I went back to laser construction.
Got it.
And I have no employees now. When he left, I had one employee here in Whidbey Island, but he went on to bigger and better things, which is great. He's one of my best friends now. Over the years that he worked for me, we became very good friends. And so I have no employees. I'm down to just myself now. And like I said, we specialize with siding. And so, I've been self-employed for over 30 years, probably about 33 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you probably have the best background of anybody in this race for talking about issues of housing and possibly homelessness. What is the problem we have in Island County, and what do you see as the solutions as far as housing?
The problem is we don't have enough. Housing prices is supply and demand. A lot of people say it doesn't affect housing, which is baloney. It does, and we do not have enough housing. When I ran 4 years ago, right after the election, the county came out with its own study, and it came out that we were 1,008 homes short in Island County of affordable housing, they call it, but I like to call it, I like to say it obtainable. We got to have housing prices in a price range that the people in the county, the citizens, can afford to buy it. And I think it's been the reason for it's been bottlenecked and restrictions or to the housing. And there's what I like to talk about, there's 4 areas of Island County that we need to address housing. Each area is different. Oak Harbor is going to have to take most of the growth. They have the sewer, the water, and they have the zoning for more multifamily. Multifamily is one way we can get the housing affordability more in line. Another way we can do it is through manufactured homes, not mobile homes, but site or factory built homes. So that's another method that can get the price down, and through volume building. One of the things that has happened is become very difficult to develop lots, and the lot prices are expensive, and there's really nobody anymore in Island County that is going to develop land very much. It's just it's been extremely difficult to get projects through the county and jump through all the hoops, and there's a lot of attention towards putting infill housing, and infill housing is expensive. You cannot really in Oak Harbor, you cannot build an infill house for probably less than $350,000 to $400,000.
Which takes it right out of that obtainable category that you're
that takes it out of the obtainable. But there's 4 areas of housing. That's Oak Harbor, takes most of the growth. We have Coopville. Coopville is pretty much can't do much of anything because the Eves Prairie and the historical district and that. There's very limited what Coopville can do. South Whidbey, Langley has got to take most of the growth, and South Whidbey has got to figure out how they want to envision the housing, and they've got to do it. And that, to me, they've got to figure it out for themselves. And then there's Camano, which has no urban growth area. And the solution for Camano is either getting changes to the Growth Management Act or incorporating all or part of Camano. But incorporating is going to take time because they need a water system and they need a sewer system to incorporate. So
how much of that is something that you can, it seems glib to say how much you could fix if you were the Island County Commissioner, but the Growth Management Act is outside of your ability to fix in that position. And the problem of EV reserve is not something you can fix as an Island County Commissioner. And it sounds like the problem in South Whidbey is something that the people in the town of Langley need to work on, maybe in cooperation with the Island County Board of Commissioners. Does that just leave Oak Harbor as someplace where you can have an impact as in housing?
No, South Whidbey, Langley can do it. What is the history that in Island County with housing? What has happened is we talk about it, we plan it, we have lots of meetings, we have ideas, and there's a lot of flexibility in the Growth Management Act if you're willing to just look for the flexibility instead of using the Growth Management Act, to which I refer to as the Growth Control Act.
Yeah.
And you cannot control growth. If you try and control growth, you're going to have a mess on your hands. You're not going to account for traffic. You're not going to account for water, sewer, all the infrastructure. So, and the Growth Management Act is actually a tool that can be used for managing growth, not controlling it, but managing it. And there's ways in there. Now it can be modified, and through my association with the State Building Association, we have worked different ways to kind of change the rules in the Growth Management Act. And sometimes it doesn't happen because of the Seattle future-wise type groups that don't want the urban part of the state to change. They're reluctant to do it, and they kind of control Olympia in a lot of ways. But it can be done, and it's going to happen. One of the tools in Island County that can be used for their rural areas of intense development, and there are ways that we can relax the rules there so that we can get more density in the county area without destroying the rural character of the county. Freeland is an area that could take some growth in the Freeland sub area, but they've got to come up with a sewer system, and that's been expensive and problematic for 5 or 6 years. It may not be able to work. I think Clinton could really take some growth. Maybe Clinton needs to be longer term looking at a way to get a sewer system in Clinton, and that would help with commuters. And it would help the economics of the Clinton area too, with the businesses there. It takes creative and it takes effort. What I, as a county commissioner, would do would plan it, figure it out, get all input from people that come and have an idea on it, and then implement it. Figure out what they come up with, and then make it happen. Just don't put it on the shelf. Don't keep talking about it.
Well, that would be important. And, you know, in talking about that, you mentioned something else that I think we probably should highlight about you as a candidate, and that is you have some involvement with the State Builders Association, so you have some familiarity with the partners that you would need to work with at the state level as well.
Yeah, I've been on the executive committee at the State Builders Association. I have connections there, and that's one of the things. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I have friends all over the state, and if there's a problem comes up, I can call them and say, "Hey, you guys had this problem with this. You know, what do you think?" You know, and they're friends. It's become the State Builders Association is like family. And yes, I've made connections with many of the senators and representatives on both sides of the aisles in Olympia. And it's a matter of having those connections and knowing how it works down there. And, you know, through the connections I have at the Builders Association to find solutions and ways that we can do stuff. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's one of the things I've been a delegate or a director with BIW for just about 10 years.
Wow, that's great. Talking about being conservative, I think most people have a pretty good idea of what it means to be a Republican at the federal level and maybe even at the state level. But what does being a Republican mean at the county level? How does being a Republican affect the policies that you think that the county should pursue?
I would say it has to do with being physically conservative. It's the budget, keeping smaller government, less intrusiveness in our everyday lives, and really, as a county commissioner, most of what you do, the most important thing you do as a county commissioner is the budget and you know, spending the revenue that we get that comes in and figuring out where it goes. There's a lot of different pots to it. There's the current expense fund, which is the property taxes. There's sales tax revenue. There's revenue that comes from investments. But there's all sorts of other little money. There's recording fee money that goes to homeless and homeless and affordable housing. There, and I'm on the county board, have been on that for 7 years, I think, maybe longer, to help decide how that is spent. There's also rural economic development money that the commissioners decide on. But I'm very physically conservative. I know how to balance a budget. I've run a business. I am in residential construction and survived the housing crisis, which was not easy. There were times that I was a little bit late on paying some of my bills, but I paid all my bills. I never lost any real estate that I own in the process. So I look at having a good reserve so you can weather these downturns.
And this is a downturn. And that's one of the things that's going to be very interesting in the next budget cycle, is how much revenue has been lost and what cuts will have to be made. I think I want to show you a slide here. Let me share this screen. And this is, one of our supporters sent us this. This is a statement that came from Indivisible Whidbey. And it says, this week, and this came out 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, Indivisible Whidbey will consider endorsing one of the 2 Democrats running in District 1, Melanie Bacon and Nathan Howard. The only candidate we'll consider endorsing District 2 is Democrat Phoebe Michaud. These races are important to our goal of fighting racism and preventing police violence against people of color. If we're looking for increased oversight over our sheriff's office, or perhaps changes in the laws providing immunity for police misconduct, or even defunding county law enforcement, then we might turn to our county commissioners to legislate these changes. Now, this is a Republican event that we're doing, so I imagine most of the people who are going to view this probably don't look too kindly on this, especially the defunding part. But what do you think of this? What's your response?
Well, defunding the police, I understand what some people are talking about with that. And to me, the sheriff's department, we don't have the problems that they have in Seattle and elsewhere, elsewhere. I think our sheriff's department has been very well run and has been, probably underfunded for a long time. And there's a lot of things that they has put on them, the sheriff's department, to do, like dealing with the homeless or addiction problem, mental health issues. And are they the right people to do that? Maybe, maybe not. But they are the ones that are tasked with doing that. Now, I would certainly look at taking some of those burdens off of them if it can be worked out, but it can't be done overnight. It's going to take a process. You can't just say, okay, we're going to, cut the sheriff's budget in half and we're going to give it to counselors to go out and engage these people, because when there's a mental health crisis going on with something, or a drug problem that happens, it's you need trained people to deal with that at the time out in the public. Now, if you can get those people into treatment, then it's a different solution. And that really, the mental health issues, the addiction issues, unfortunately, is the state takes, kind of dictates the funding for that. The county really doesn't have much in the way of responsibility there and that. And I think the state has done a horrible job with that for a long time. But if, so the defunding part, I can understand when they're talking about defunding, if you're going to take the burden off the sheriff's department for handling some of these difficult situations. But it can't be just say, okay, we're going to just do this. It's gotta be a plan, and it's gotta be set in motion, and it will take time.
I think that language, it's tricky because some people in the national level who use that kind of language don't mean it literally. They're just going to cut the funding of the police department. Some people do. And it's clearly the people down in CHOP felt that way. But
and it didn't work out so well for them there. I shouldn't say that. It was not a good situation.
Yeah, bad things happen there. You ran for this job 4 years ago. Came up a little short to Helen Price Johnson, who was a multi-term incumbent. What made you decide to run again?
I feel that I've got the connections, the experiences, and all to fix a lot of problems, or to get the county headed in a good direction. I'm one that I don't have all the answers. I would never claim to have all the answers, but I've got a lot of connections, people I know that I can get on the phone and call them on both sides of the aisle, or people within that their job is like Carol Squire, the executive director of Good Cheer, is a good friend. And I can call her, and I have called her when this virus hit, and the distribution of food, the problems that showed up there. I called Carol, and we had some talks about what the holes were in the county, or how we could get this food over here. And I found out there's no cold storage, or very minimal cold storage in Island County. It's a problem that needs to be fixed. Good Cheer has a little bit. The other food, Help House has none. The other food banks have none. So there's again, I've been criticized the fact in the past of being somebody who is friends with everybody, and that I have connections with all different personalities and different dynamics. So I think that I bring that to the table, and the connections I have, again, through the State Builders Association, all over the state. I have a friend of mine in the State Builders Association said once that, if he's traveling around the state and his truck broke down, he could get on the phone and somebody could be there in a half hour. And I got the same thing.
Nice. That might be a good segue to one of the other things that you're involved in Island County, and that would be Civility First. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Civility First. I'm very passionate about it. It's a group. It was founded 3 years ago, and it was founded. I was not part of the founding of it. But when I first heard about it, I was very intrigued, and then it took me 6 months to a year to actually, find the time to get involved. I'm on the board now. It was created out of frustration of people, the animosity, the hatred, the not being civil to other people. And so it was basically originally set up as the board was half red and half blue. We've kind of changed now. It's, we're red, we're blue, we're purple. We don't have it that it's a hard and fast half and half. And one of the misconceptions about Civility First is that they're saying, well, you be civil and you don't talk, or you don't, hold your tongue or whatever. That's far from the truth, or what they're about. What it is, and I've learned a lot. I have learned a lot since I've been on there, in how to communicate with people. And the best way to communicate with people, especially when emotions are running high, there's passions going on, is to listen. And you listen carefully, and And when you listen to somebody, even though you don't agree with them, let them talk, ask questions about what they're saying, ask why they feel that way or where it's coming from. And after they've vented a while or they've said it, then you say, well, okay, I heard you. Let me tell you what I think. And they kind of, at that point, they kind of go, well, you listen, so now I kind of have to listen. And having those dialogues, you may not change somebody's opinion, but at least you find out that we're all humans, we're all Americans, and we're really not so much different. And you get the anger, the emotions subsided, and you can have a good conversation. You might, if you listen carefully, you might even learn something a little bit. So I think it's with Civility First right now, with the dynamics that are going on, it's hugely needed, hugely needed. You're muted, I think, Alan.
Technology.
That's all right. These Zooms are hard.
Well, what I was saying is we're coming up to the end of our time. So that's actually a good point. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do it if they want to help out with your campaign?
If they want to help out with my campaign, probably call me. I never answer my cell phone, but I get back to you. If I answer my cell phone, I would never get any work done. So, and my phone number is 360-914-1070. And if anybody has questions for me direct, I do much better talking one-on-one with people, and I can communicate better that way than just sound bites and things like that.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is, this is going to be part of a package of interviews we're doing with county commissioner candidates. And so in the little interstitial space between this interview and the next one, we'll put that phone number up, and we'll also include it on our website when we upload it. So thank you so much, Gary, for taking this time to talk about your campaign. Best of luck.
Thank you for putting this together, because it's a different world right now as far as when I campaigned 4 years ago, it was easy to get the message out. It was easy to meet people, and it's been totally different this time. And it's been a struggle. And so having these kinds of things to be able to get the message out is very helpful.
Great. Glad we could help. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Have a good evening.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was our interview with Gary Wray, candidate for Island County Commissioner in District 1. Here is Gary's phone number, 360-914-1070, if you'd like to get involved in Gary's campaign for Island County Commissioner. Join our mailing list to keep informed about the Island County Republican Party. We'll let you know about upcoming Central Committee meetings and other events, and opportunities to help us get Republicans into office. For more information, go to our website at islandcountygop.com and click the sign up link on our homepage. Our final interview is with Incumbent District 2 Commissioner Jill Johnson. Jill was first elected in 2012 and is running for her third term. And here's our interview with Jill Johnson. Welcome, Commissioner Jill Johnson. And we'd really appreciate your coming to tell us about yourself and your campaign and your experience as an Island County Commissioner. But let's start with maybe 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Sure. Well, thank you for creating this opportunity. There's not as many opportunities out there to share who you are as a candidate or as an elected official, so I appreciate the platform. I'm Jill Johnson. I was raised on Whidbey Island. I'm a graduate of Oak Harbor High School, home of the Wildcats. And then I went to Central Washington University, where I studied communications and economics. My goal was to be a business reporter and to tell the stories of entrepreneurs and different risk takers and their business success. And it was kind of a safe way to be a risk taker. in my mind. But I ended up going to work in Olympia for a man named Barney Beeksma. He was state representative then, and I worked for the House Republican Caucus for a year. I went on to work at the Washington State Republican Party as a finance director, which is really a fancy way of saying fundraiser. But I like to say finance director because that sounds very authoritative. And I, for the next 10, 12 years, I did that as a job, going around the country raising money for different candidates and working at different levels of government in support of elected officials in terms of how to get them elected. And then I moved back to Whidbey Island. My parents are raising my niece. She's got some developmental delays. Her name's Lydia. I talk about her a lot. And I wanted to be closer to her and my family and be supportive of her and just make sure I had a relationship there. And so when I moved back here, I went to work at Whidbey Island Bank, and then I became the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. I did that for about 6 years, and then ran for Island County Commissioner because there was a significant issue between the city and the county on a land use issue, ironically. And I thought, well, the commissioner at the time really didn't have the right tone, was taking a too strident stance on many of the environmental protections that were being proposed. They weren't incremental. They were just they were very extreme, and it just wasn't in sync with who we were as a community. So I ran against her and won. And then I've been a county commissioner ever since. My first day of work was in 2013. And I decided to run again for county commissioner because I'm very concerned about the amount of experience that will be on the board if I'm not there. So I made that decision to run. And my husband, Alex Pfeiffer, who's a realtor, was very supportive of the decision and encouraging for me to continue to do it because, as he describes it, I have far too much passion to not do it. And so he figured I'd just be sitting on the couch saying, that's not right. So best to just send me to work on it. And then for hobbies and things, I like golfing, which is going to the driving range. I only like to golf at the driving range because when you leave the driving range, it matters more where your ball lands. So I like golf only in those terms. And then Alex and I, we're kind of farmers market people. We just like to go around and see all the local vendors and stuff in the community. We're just very community focused. It's probably one of my highest priorities, again, because I'm from here and it's my place and it's the people I grew up with are here, the people who've mentored me, my family. So that's kind of my background and what motivates me to be in public office.
Very good. I'm going to pick up on a couple things that you just talked about. Let's start with this. There are 10 people running for county commissioner seats this year between District 1 and District 2. You're the only one who's actually done the job. So can you tell us a little bit about what it's like being a county commissioner, what your days and weeks are like?
I find the number of people who are running for county commissioner interesting because if you ask people what a county commissioner is, majority of them can't tell you. And so I think there's a perception that this is kind of an entry-level position, maybe that you can do part-time, get your feet wet in government, and kind of see how it goes. And that's actually far from the truth. This is a full-time job. I think the minimum amount you could spend as a county commissioner and just put checks in the boxes. So not accomplish really anything, advocate for anything, but just simply show up, sign your name where you're supposed to, and smile is probably, you could probably get by with 25 hours a week or so. But again, that's just showing up to the things you're supposed to show up to. It's not taking the time to learn or to do anything. So the job is really that administrative role of like you'd see in a mayor and the policy role like you'd see in a city council, all combined into one position. And that authority is then divided up with 3 commissioners equally, which means it takes 2 commissioners to accomplish anything. 2 have to be on the same page to go in any direction. 1 can't direct things independently. So so it sounds like it's a lot of power vested in a singular position it is, but then it's divided up. So you have to do this whole compromising thing. And there's a lot of that. So really my schedule, Monday, I do constituent work. I meet with people either in the office or in the community. Emails, Monday's the email day, return phone call day, typically Monday. Tuesdays, we vote, and then we have executive sessions on that day, meetings with staff. Typically all that internal work happens on Tuesdays. Wednesdays, we have work sessions. So that's the day that we all three sit there and the department heads come to us requesting changes to contracts, floating ideas by us. It's policy, it's administrative. Everything has to get vetted on that Wednesday before it goes back to a Tuesday meeting to be voted on. Thursdays are typically the days that we do our committee assignments. So I'm on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, which sounds geeky, but it's actually super interesting. We talk about recycling rates and how you get rid of biosolids and the cost of all of that and our options for doing it better. I'm on 3 behavioral health committees, 1 regionally, 2 at the state level. So I have meetings related to those issues. The IT committee, I'm on the IT committee. I was just trying to think of all of them the other day, and it literally, you just kind of show up in routine. The Northwest Workforce Council, the Council on Aging and Disabilities, I'm on that. That's a regional council. So, I mean, we each have anywhere between 10 to, I think the most I ever had in a year was 16 different committees outside of what you do. So and those are committees where you literally sit on board of directors. So you vote on their budget, oversee staff, different activities. And then Fridays,
I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you about that because, I used to sit on the Oak Harbor Planning Commission, which meets once a month. And I think most of these boards and committees meet monthly. Is that right?
Right.
And so the casual hearer might think, oh, it's something she has to do once a month, big deal. But the Planning Commission, we got meeting packets that could be from 40 to, with some of the land applications, 600 pages worth of reading material, oftentimes getting them just about a week before the meeting. Is that the kind of workload you get from each of those committees? They give you some big packet you've got to work through?
You get a packet, a budget, staff recommendations, policy recommendations from each of those committees you're on. And I would say really the truth of it is you're on it with commissioners from other regions as well, oftentimes. So what happens is different commissioners will find different passion areas. So I'm very engaged on the North Sound Behavioral Health Organization. And then when I sit on the Northwest Regional Council, which does developmental disabilities and aging, I'm engaged, but not as engaged as I am on the other.
Sure.
One of the other commissioners from San Juan sits on both of those committees with me. He's less engaged on behavioral health than he is on the Northwest, the Council on Developmental Disabilities and Aging. And so what you tend to do naturally is you'll find different commissioners within your own board and within the region who step up to kind of champion different issues so that everything has a real in-depth champion. You look at all that stuff, and if there's a red flag, you say, hey, this seems off, but I don't dive in as deep on every committee as I do on some. And then the goal is to make sure that there's at least one commissioner who's diving in deep on every committee, because we've seen what happens when everybody's just like, nodding their head and not asking tough questions. You're still a board of directors. You still have to do that duty. So if nobody's doing it, I'll dig in deeper. But typically what I've seen is that with a moderate level of engagement in most areas and a high level in some areas, the system kind of works, that everybody kind of picks their place to really dig in. But those packets can take a couple hours for each committee.
I'll bet.
Yeah. So, and then Fridays, Fridays, more constituent things, more community meeting or board meetings, if some of them are on Fridays. And if ever you get a day off, that could be Fridays are usually the best time to do it. And the 5th week of the month. So if you're a county commissioner, you just live for the 5th week of the month because there's not a Tuesday meeting and your schedule usually is a little bit lighter. So we'll all try to take time off on the 5th week so it doesn't interrupt the flow of work.
Sure.
And then, and then constituents, they will reach out whenever, right? So Saturdays, you have events to go to, or people have questions, and they're not really interested in what you're doing. They really need you to be interested in what their problem is. And so typically you have work, pretty much all the time. I don't work on Sundays as a practice. I mean, I really don't. So, and that's mostly just to create some boundaries for my personal life as well. I mean, I got a husband, and he doesn't like it to be all about other people all the time. So you got to build in some space for that. But it is not an entry level. It's not an entry level job. You're an administrator of an organization, a CEO of an organization. And then again, as I mentioned, the three-way split of power. We do all of that administrative work and policy work in public, because two people can't work together in private, right? Or that would be, we would be in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act, and two constitutes a quorum. So I'm always aware that people say, well, county government's the most volatile. Why can't those people get along? And it's been that way historically. I asked about it because I was like, is this just a Jill thing? Like, why are these meetings so contentious? And when you talk to staff who's been there a long time, they're like, no, they've always been that way, because you don't work out your details in a caucus. So when I worked in Olympia, you'd go behind closed doors, the caucus would work it out, the debate would happen, you open the doors, and everybody goes out and smiles, right? Or even if you're on a committee, you take testimony from people, you go into your committee rooms, you decide what bills are going to come out and what bills aren't going to come out based on whatever negotiations they do, private. We sit at a table, our first pass of information is in public, our first reactions to what the other commissioners think is in public, our negotiations on how to get things done are in public. I mean, it is, and that's true about the administrative function of the job too. So if you want to discipline an employee, you can go into executive session to talk about their performance. If you want to take action on that performance, give them a corrective action plan, do anything that involves directive, you have to come out in public to give the directive. Well, can you imagine being that employee? So typically what happens is that we'll discuss what the issues are in private, and then one commissioner will take responsibility for dealing with that individual who needs some corrective action utilizing HR and the tools we have there. The other two stay out of it so that we don't have any quorum problems or violations. But then that individual will usually try to meet with the two commissioners who aren't talking to them to undercut the one commissioner that is, right? Because you need two and you only had one. So it's like, well, maybe this one isn't telling me, when they're telling me I have to improve in these three areas, maybe that's not the majority of the board. So you also spend a fair amount of time relationship managing because of the way the three is all set up. That's probably what it took me the longest to learn. Okay. It's not easy. It's joyful. I mean, I'm so honored to do it, but it's not easy.
Yeah. It sounds like a convoluted system and designed intentionally to be that way.
Yes. I mean, I think on some level, as much as we all want government to be efficient, how convoluted it is, how bureaucratic it is, slows it down enough so that you can't just push stuff through, right? Yeah. And from a public standpoint, I can see where there's that value in that. As somebody who's in it day to day, there are days that I just pray for more efficiency.
Oh man. Okay, well that's actually really interesting, and I think it's surprising probably to most of the people who hear this, certainly to me, that I think most people think of elected officials as being primarily policy people and not administrative people. Just if you were going to put a percentage split on your time, where does that balance lie? Is it 50-50 admin and policy, or is it weighted one way or the other?
So for me, because most of my district's the city of Oak Harbor, right? So a lot of the policy decisions that other commissioners are dealing with their districts, quality of life policy decisions, a lot of that is controlled by the city in my district, and a lot of constituent relationship and constituent issues are really city issues, just jurisdictionally. So I don't have as much pressure on that side. So I spend about I'd say 60 to 75% of my time on that administrative function. I spend a lot of time with HR, IT. I'm on the risk management committee for the state, so I spend a lot of time with risk. I spend a lot of time with department heads, making sure we're focused on our goals. How are we going to get there? You know, what are you struggling with? When things start falling apart at the work session table, I go back and try to see what's going on, because there's usually a problem that they are trying to solve that they don't want to tell us about. And then I try to help solve the problem, and then they say, you know what, we got this. Thank you for playing. So, but I spend a disproportionate amount of my time on the admin piece of it.
Okay, that's interesting. Not what I would have expected.
Well, also because I'm not a big regulator, right? And so policies usually lead themselves to new rules and regulations. And because I feel like we have plenty, I'm not as also motivated sometimes to engage in new policy discussions, because I don't need them to end up in more requirements on people.
That might be a good segue to the next topic. So I think a lot of people have a very clear idea of what it means to be a Republican at the federal level, certainly. At the state level, probably. I don't think a lot of people know what it means to be a Republican at a local or a county level. So in the piece that you do spend your time on policy, how does being a Republican inform those policy choices? Clearly, you have a bias towards less regulation.
I do.
What else?
So I like to invest our budget money in educational programming. So I've been a supporter of WSU because it educates people on how to make the right decisions. And I find that when people know what to do correctly, most people do it. So I spend time asking, what have we done in terms of public outreach and education to make sure that people are empowered to do the right thing versus told what the right thing is. And then from a policy standpoint, a lot more questions about what does it cost in the short term? What does it cost for us to stand up a program or service? What does it cost us to maintain that over time? That there are things that are super fun, right? But then when you look at the long-term costs of how you maintain that, operationally, we're not well positioned to carry it forward. Even if we get money up front to build it, you still have to repair it, replace it, maintain it. So I ask a lot of questions about that. A lot of questions about scope. Is this our lane? Should county government be in this conversation at all? Is this our responsibility, or is it the responsibility of another level of government? Is it something that an outside agency should do? Are we any more than conversation conveners or maybe conversation leaders, but does it need to result in a body of work for us? So those types of real clarifying questions, prioritization questions. I tend to, a lot of the issues at the state and federal level involve social issues. The county does not deal with social issues. That's not where those policy decisions are made. So we fairly implement government at that kind of local level. And there's not as much partisanship that takes place. And you don't really notice it until conservation futures, should we buy something or should we not? That sometimes gets a little politicized. Climate change related issues, how far do we go in regulating different activities? You'll sometimes see partisan issues there, but rarely does something just fall right down the line. It presents itself more in thought process. How we engage in the conversation is usually where you see the ideology present itself the most.
That might lead to this question. When you were elected, and up until the beginning of last year, you were one of 2 Republicans on the Board of Commissioners. Now there are 2 Democrats and a Republican. Can you talk a little bit about how that's changed what your job is like?
So I'm thankful for this time period where there haven't been 2 Republican votes, because it demonstrated to me the value of having 2 Republican votes, and also it showed a culture difference. So the first 6 years, the questions were very defined and proposed to our staff. This is what we want to know. This is what our priorities are. and not everything was prioritized equally. And I don't want to be disparaging to my colleagues. I mean, they're great, but there are definite style differences. And so right now, everything's pretty much a good idea. It's hard to figure out what the clear priorities are, even for me, and I sit at the table with them all the time. And then I have noticed lately that I say no a lot in public. And I can count on my hands the number of times I said no in public the first 6 years. And what I realized is that a lot of ideas didn't get momentum in those first 6 years. We're just like, no, it's not within our scope. We don't have the resources for that. Let's both make the big things the big things. And the ideas never came to the table. Now these ideas are starting to come to the table, and I'm in a position to say publicly, no, I don't support that for these reasons. It used to be that the breaks of the organization all happened kind of behind the scenes, right? The only conversations that came forward were conversations that had momentum around them, pretty much in a bipartisan way. Because if Rick and I were on board, for example, Commissioner Hanold and I were on board, Helen are usually on board. There weren't very many things that we pushed forward that she was opposed to. I think her greatest disappointment is we were always opposed to more things than she wanted to accomplish. But now all the ideas are coming forward. And so publicly, I say no a lot more. And that has been eye-opening to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I can imagine that being the case, because Janet St. Clair and Rick Hanold are wildly different people in what their policy preferences would be. That makes sense.
I mean, and also I would say there's the partisan piece of it, and then there's this local piece of it. And I'm not saying that if you're not local, you can't be a county commissioner, but there is a unique understanding of culture that is important on that board. And so some of the ideas that come forward now with Rick's replacement are very big policy ideas, very urban in focus, very focused on what other urban counties are doing. And I'm like, well, that's not relevant to us. Like, I appreciate that, there's a desire to be a policy leader and to play regionally and play on the state level. But in all reality, you're delivering local service, and you need to be hyper focused on your citizens, not on, name dropping from somebody you talk to in King County. Those policies don't fit us. That's the tension local governments have all the time with state mandates, right? One size doesn't fit all. So quit bringing your urban ideas to us. They don't work.
Right. Said
lovingly.
Well, so let's expand a little bit on that. You've been in office for 7.5 years. One of the things you said that you've learned is about the differences between being the majority and minority. What else have you learned, and what are you most proud of having accomplished in the last 7.5 years? I mean,
I've learned a lot about collaboration, right? And as much as you think, well, you sit at a table and you just put issues out there and you duke it out. A lot about give and take, right? To listen to what your colleagues' priorities are and make sure you're being supportive of their goals when you can be, because you need them to be supportive of your goals when you need them. So I've learned a lot about that, a lot about the county budget. I mean, I say this frequently, and I really hope people understand it. And it sounds insincere coming from me, but it's actually really a true statement. I've been a part of writing 7 county budgets, 8 at the end of this year. Commissioner Price Johnson is not coming back to the Board of County Commissioners. She had more experience than me on the budget, but now we're down to Janet, who has written 1 county budget. And we're going into an economic downturn as it relates to the COVID, revenues that aren't coming in from sales tax. And my understanding of how that budget works, how it's leveraged, how the different funds work, what you can interfund loan to one program to support it for the short term. I mean, you are going to have a hard time replacing that fast enough for the economic consequences that are coming forward to the county. And so I know that budget really well, and I would not pull a 7-year county commissioner off the budget and replace it with somebody who has 1 year of experience going into an economic downturn. It's just not, it's not responsible. Then, and then probably the thing that I didn't know I would be interested in, because as I shared, I ran for county commissioner on a land use issue, but I really have taken on this role in behavioral health. There's been a lot of state changes in terms of how we treat people with mental health and chemical dependency issues, probably more so in the last 5 years than in the last 20, 30 previous years. The whole system of funding has changed. The state's role in who they care for and who they're willing to care for has changed. And there's a lot of local impact in those decisions. So if you think about rural communities that don't have access to care facilities, if their hospital doesn't have access to mental health providers, legally the hospital can't just bed somebody in there and strap them down unless they provide services. So if the primary reason they're walking in the door is a mental health crisis, they can't hold that person. So they put them out in the community. Well, then what, right? So then we put them in jail for disturbing the peace or something like that. But our jail folks aren't designed to deal with mental health issues. I mean, that is not what they were hired to do, and that's not the job requirements. Yet it's what it's becoming. So I started falling into some of these conversations, recognizing that this is a financial strain on our system, and B, and these aren't A, B in terms of priorities. These are A and A. That it's not humane what we're doing to people. They're sick in lots of instances. If you have schizophrenia, you didn't wake up and say, hey, today's my day, right? They're sick, and we don't have that treatment model in place. So I started getting engaged in that, trying to understand the financial ramifications of this, and then also the local impacts of the state decision. And I really have risen to being a leader in the state on this. There is actually a state task force that I created. It's so hard to say but this is actually true, that I created, which is designed to have local government, counties, work with the healthcare authority to say the investments that you're making in these places are leaving way too many gaps, and we're seeing too many impacts in our community. And so we built this collaborative committee. The Ruckle House Center is bringing us all together to make sure that we're getting the feedback investments are there for behavioral health in the right ways. Not necessarily to counties. Counties are struggling because they used to do behavioral health, and now they're getting pulled out of behavioral health, and we think that's a tragedy. I actually don't care where the service gets delivered. I think that county government may not be the place for the service to get delivered. I just want to help drive the investments to the right place so that in our local community, we don't see people being hurt or targeted or marginalized or going untreated because our system that said it would care for them fell apart and we didn't make the investments in the right spot. So when I say I'm hyper local, I am. The only issue I engage with on the state level is behavioral health, and because commissioners turn over a lot, I've become a de facto leader on that. I'd like to think it's because I'm smart, but I'm sure it's just because I've been there the longest.
Hey, there's a lot of merit in that. 95% of life is showing up, right?
That's true.
Well, I have a long list of other questions to get to, and we are running out of time. So I'm gonna back burner some of these, because I know we could talk for another hour on all the interesting things going on at the county.
I know I promised you I'd be concise and get to the point, and then you saw what happened.
Well, it's an occupational hazard.
It's true.
But you know what? I do want to say this. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. I think it's so beneficial for people to get a chance to hear what county commissioners do as we're moving into an election cycle. So I thank you for that. If people want to get in touch with you to help out with your campaign, what's the best way for them to reach you? Is that with your Facebook page or?
I do a lot on Facebook. I have electjilljohnson.com website, okay, and you can go there and send an email, or my phone number, it's out there. So it's 360-632-2558. I would share that I hate talking on the phone, so usually like a quick text is better so I understand the context of what we're going to talk about, and then it's easier to call back.
Yeah. I find it's so much easier for me to get communication from people, something in text. because then I can refer back to it and really, you know, think about it and that kind of thing. So that makes sense.
And then one other thing, if I have time to add it real quick.
Sure.
So I didn't talk about the independently elected officials at all, and Island County is made up of independently elected officials. So the prosecutor, the judges, the sheriff, the auditor, the assessor, the clerks, they're all elected independently. And I know that there's some conversation out in the community about oversight, what kind of oversight the commissioners are exercising over those departments. And I just want to be really upfront that we don't have policy oversight over those independently elected officials. So if you're concerned about who the prosecutor chooses to prosecute, that is actually something that you as an elected citizen need to deal with the prosecutor on. I'm not trying to be deflective, but we're getting a lot more questions about that. And other than budgeting in terms of making sure those departments have the adequate resources, how those departments are run, who they choose to prosecute or arrest, or what procedures that they have in place, those are up to the individual elected officials. I have a lot of confidence in ours. I think we have good independent elected officials, but I did, in that context of what does a county commissioner do, there are limits to our oversights of independently elected officials.
That is actually one of the geniuses and one of the most frustrating things about our system. It's the power is spread very diffusely.
Yeah.
At the county level, at the municipal level, at the state and federal levels, but it's hard to know who the right person to talk to is when you have a concern. So it's a double-edged sword. I'm
happy to refer people. I just I want to create clear expectations about my ability to. I can have conversations and try to influence from that standpoint, but I don't have authority that's been vested in us.
Right, right. Very good. All right, great. Thank you so much, Jill.
Well, thanks.
We're going to be putting this up on the website. We're recording this just for the benefit of the viewers. We're recording this on Saturday, July 3rd, or Friday, July 3rd. I got the day off, so it feels like Saturday. I expect that we're going to have this up on the website and YouTube and everything on Monday or Tuesday. So ballots drop in less than 2 weeks, week and a half. And so look for your ballot and vote for the candidate of your choice. Make sure you get those ballots in. All right. Thanks, Jill. We will talk to you again soon.
Thank you again.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Alan.
That concludes our interviews with candidates for Island County Commissioner. If you have found this valuable, or you want to help us with our mission of electing Republicans, consider donating to the ICRP. You can donate with your credit card at the website shown here, secure.antidote.com/Island County Republican Party Commissioners. All of the proceeds from your donations go to elect great Republican candidates like Jill Johnson, Gary Wray, and Damian Green. One more note. Oh, this is a slide from our old presentation, but the main point down here is still key. Choose a candidate. Whichever one of these candidates, or if you have another Republican candidate that you support, choose them, work for them as hard as you can, and see that they get through this primary. I want to thank everyone for joining us and remind you all, vote Republican. Have a great day.